Okay. Good evening, everybody. This is the Progressive Mind Show. I'm your host, Senna, aka Alinko, and we want to respond to a video that is circulating on social media. I have been talking about bridging the gap since 2017, way before the wave of the diaspora and the wave of the return 2019. And what we saw at the time was the grave disparity and disconnect among Black people in the diaspora. For those of you who don't know what the diaspora is, it's just basically a huge community, or the bigger community of Black people, whether you're Caribbean, African, African American, um, Afro Latino, South American, you belong to the African diaspora community or the Black diaspora. Now, over the years, one of the things that motivated me into this work, Bridging the Gap, was I saw that I realized that in Ghana or in Africa, Africans, for the most part, especially among the youth, adore and admire Black Americans. We mimic their style, their swag, drip, the young people call it, even the way they go about their entertainment, yeah, their pop culture, right? You'll see a lot of kids, even till date, see a lot of young people trying to rap just like American, trying to talk like Americans, especially Black Americans. Um, there's actually a thing in Ghana, and they call it locally acquired slang or locally acquired accent, something like that. I've forgotten when we were growing up in the 90s, which means that there are a lot of people in Ghana or in Africa who try to talk and sound like Black Americans. It just goes to tell you the connect, the love, right, that we have for fellow Blacks who live outside the continent of Africa. But when I came here, I began to see how the African community would react, or people within the African community would react when you mention African Americans, or when you try to talk about issues that concerning them, right? And then when I meet African Americans, they also have issues about how Africans would view them and how Africans react to them, and of course, Africans who were born here also had an experience with Black Americans during times during their education, right, or during their time of schooling in this country, where African Americans will call them booty scratchers and so what, and so forth. And actually, that wasn't just that. I mean, Black Americans would basically kind of subtly bully or just make Africans feel very uncomfortable, unwanted, and so forth. And so there had been that. So Africans, also the ones who are born here. So there's different categories of Africans, right? Those that are on the continent, those that have traveled here through voluntary migration, and those that were born here. So African parents giving birth to their children here. So they are Americans, but and have African parents, and they have literally had to experience these things from fellow Blacks. And I'm sure the Caribbeans who were born here may have had to go through that as well. But particularly African American, I mean Africans experiencing some type of bullying from Africans taking some type of experiences, some type of bullying from Black Americans. And so this disparity has gone on for a long time. And again, for the very long time, again, before 2019 onwards, when everybody's talking about diaspora, this diaspora now, a lot of people have had these things in them, especially within the African community and the African American community. A lot of people have had these type of experiences where we seem to butt heads, we seem to clash. There is this um, uneasiness when we meet, right? Whether at the workplace, some Africans have expressed that African Americans at the workplace sometimes don't really want to acknowledge them or acknowledge their presence, or feel a certain kind of way when they see Africans. Africans also kind of feel a certain kind of way when they see Black Americans. These things has been in existence for a long time. There are reasons why we feel this way towards each other, which are not intentional. Because guess what? We are all Black people, and naturally, when you see someone who looks like you, whose features look like you, and texture and complexion, or looks similar to yours, naturally you should feel gravitated towards that person. Naturally you should want to connect, trying to find out, right, trying to link up with that person. But as soon as we meet, whether it's in public spaces or private spaces, when we connect Blacks, Africans, and African Americans, and to a larger extent Caribbeans, there seems to be this tension, right? And there's a high level of I'll say animosity or dislike internally already before we say a word to each other. First of all, let's understand that that's not who we are as a people, right? You have to understand who a Black man is. That we were born and we are embedded with excellence, humanity, love, compassion, hospitality. This is the reason why we were conquered by the Europeans in the first place, which led to colonialism, slavery, and all of that. We have so much heart. And so sometimes other groups take that for granted. And of course, that was taken for granted by the Arabs who first started slavery, and then the Europeans, and so forth. So let's understand that as a people collectively, whether you are a Black person in the Caribbean community, from South America, from Australia, America, or Africa, Black people are just people of humanity. Hospitality is embedded in us, in addition to excellence, brilliance, name it. And that's why we call ourselves magic people. We are magic, right? It's just in us. We are born with intellectual capacity, intellectual capabilities, so many abilities that makes us envious by other groups. So understand one thing, that as a group, we as a people, as a race, we're just awesome. But something happened to us, right? Something happened to us about 400 or 500 years ago, which caused us to disperse painfully. We separated from each other painfully, right? The African on the continent suffered colonialism, and so our history was wiped away. How colonialism happened, another time we can go into that conversation, but it happened. We were defeated. Some of our ancestors, our kings fought, but they couldn't, because the European went and invented, I think, the Gatling machine gun or something. They went and invented the gun, brought the gun, and that was the end of the war between Europeans and Africans on the continent. And so colonialism started. They ruled us, dictated to us, gave us the education, gave us the way of life. And then a lot of our people were also brought here to the Americas, right? Which is what we've always known as the transatlantic slavery, which means that Africans were brought to America and the Caribbean, and so that's why you have the triangle. And so we were dispersed painfully. Our story is one of a unique one. I think that as in this modern history, we are the only group of people that have suffered this manner of tragedy compared to other races, right? And so whether you were African or Black person in America, or Black person on the continent of Africa, understand that we went through atrocious events like colonialism and slavery, right? Slavery being the worst, right? Over 400 years of slavery. And understand that it's our people, the same Africans, right? So if you're a Ghanaian, Nigerian, or Togolese, Beninois, West African particularly, understand that your ancestors, the Black Americans we see today, the people that we call Black Americans or African Americans, because in Africa we call African Americans, we refer to them as Black Americans, only for us to come here and realize, oh, they are called African Americans. But anyway, the people that we call African Americans, and we call, sometimes have nicknames for them, they are literally our ancestors. My great grandfather, grandmother, your great 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 grandfather grandmother, who were snatched, right, from families. They were captured, tortured. You remember there were about, history tells us about 20 million people in total were brought to the Americas. A lot of them died. A lot of them could not sustain, could not go through and endure the pain. So those who survived, right, those who survived the process, the transit from the gruesome transportation of our people from Africa to this place, were about 8-12 million in total, right? And understand that they captured the best of the best, the most beautiful, the tallest, the biggest, the strongest, right? The kings and queens, royals, right? People with skills, right? They captured the best of us, and brought us to the Americas. And whilst they were coming, a lot of them suffered and died, right? Those who have visited the transatlantic slavery, you understand what our people went through, right? They went through unimaginable, unexplainable circumstances. Some died in that process, and even when on the ships, some also died. Some revolted on the ship. They were thrown aboard. Some decided to actually drown themselves, right. They would rather choose death than to come to America to be enslaved, or go to the Caribbean to be enslaved. So understand. And even where they kept them in the ship while they were exporting our people here, when you look at the videos, when you research and you hear the stories, and you learn more, you see that our ancestors were treated less than humans, right? They were treated less than human. They were treated with inhumane and unexplainable conditions and punishment whilst they were being transported here, and under the most authoritarian circumstances, and they were meted with the worst treatment, right? And these were done against their will, against their will. They had no, there was nothing, there was no freedom. So these were people that were our people, our ancestors were brought here under pain and torture. And guess what? Not all of them survived, even during even the transition to the Americas. So those who made it are the very finest, the best of the best, the best of the best of human traits that you can ever find in anybody at a time. Because again, if you document and if you cast your mind back and you actually research how we were brought here, how our people were brought here, you would understand that the ones that survived must have been like, they must have been awesome. They must have been extremely strong. And that should attest to the fact that these were royals, because only royal blood is able to sustain this type of circumstance and treatment, but yet it's able to hold its own and survive. And then remember, when they got here, history also tells us that they were treated a little bit more than the animal. Actually, they were considered like animal. Some also considered them less than animal, right? Animals. So our ancestors did not have their freedom. Their names were taken from them. Their cultures were taken from them. Their royalty was stripped from them. So if I am called Kojo or Ama or Kwesi, I'm not Ama. Of course, in Ghana, women are called Ama. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about for the Ghanaians. But if you are whatever African name you had in Africa and you brought it to the Americas, you still have it intact. Nobody's going to take it away from you, right? The beads that we wear, the chains that we wear, right? The ornaments that we wear, the way we dress, the cultures were preserved on the continent, even though we went through colonialism, and that is a different conversation to be had. We will have that later, but we somehow were able to preserve our culture on the continent of Africa. But those who came here, remember, now they are being treated like animals, and so unfortunately, and so they had to lose everything, right? They lost everything against their will, and they were beaten. They worked a lot of them to death. They worked from dawn to dusk, right? I would not have the time, but another time we would have a conversation about the suffering of our people. And this is not to revel in the past, but it's just to lay a foundation, to create a context for the conversations that needs to be had. So imagine that your ancestors, I'm talking to Africans now. I'm talking to Africans. I'm talking to Africans who have traveled here to the Americas, to North America. I'm talking to Africans who are on the continent. Now, please pay attention. That imagine your ancestors who have been brought here. They beat them to take their names off, their culture and everything off of them. And if you and a lot of you have seen an example of it through the movies like Roots and all that, right? So imagine that people going through this, but yet they did not give up. Understand that the Africans that came here, who are now African Americans or Black Americans, did not give up in spite of the heinous treatment of slavery. A lot of them revolted. A lot of them fought for their freedom. A lot of them, of course, escaped. And that's why you have the stories of the Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad that led to the North. A lot of them escaped to the North, New York and whatnot. But of course, not everybody was able to be freed, or not everybody was able to escape. Again, my encouragement is Africans, read and learn about slavery to understand the suffering of our people. Now, that should be, for this purpose, for the purpose of the conversation today, this is just a tip of the iceberg, just basically laying the framework or the foundation for the bigger conversation that I want us to have. But of course, there's a need for us to go deeper into the history of African Americans. And again, remember, when you say African Americans or Black Americans, these are descendants or descendants of Africans, descendants of your ancestors. I'm talking to Africans, West Africans. These are descendants of your great-great-grandfathers and grandmothers who have come here. Now, before they came here, we understand there were other Black people in America. We know the Native Indians, and so we know the story. But a lot of Africans were brought here. So if that is the case, African Americans are not different from us as Africans, because if you look closely at them and their features, they look like your brothers, they look like your aunties, they look like your cousins back on the continent. And a lot of them doing their DNA and they're finding out they're from West Africa. So what's the difference? We're not that different. The reason why we are now seeing them as different people, especially for those who have come here, those Africans that have come here, the reason why we see African Americans different subconsciously, or we look at them as different people, is that we, the Africans who have migrated here, did not really get a chance or the opportunity to learn about our own history as Africans. And we also did not get a chance to learn about Black Americans or Africans who were taken to the Americas due to transatlantic slavery. So what did they know? We went to school, we went to college and universities and all of that. We did Sunday schools at churches and all the institutions and all the education that we had in Ghana, which were European controlled anyway. None of the books that we read most of the books we read in schools were written by Europeans, whether it's history, economics, mathematics, geography, all of that. Most of them were written by Europeans. So again, we were not taught, we did not learn, and we don't know about Black Americans and their story. And so when we come here, all we know about them is what we see on TV. Well, and the only thing we see on TV is hip hop, pop culture, which is why a lot of Africans have been influenced by pop culture. Look at the way, again, you can just look at the youth and you see how they dress, how in the musical videos, you can just tell that we have been heavily influenced by Black American culture, pop culture, which we Africans on the continent didn't create. They created this. I'm making a case. I'm coming to culture here. And so we don't have, the only view we have of Black Americans before we ever set foot in America is what we see through pop culture. Right. And then the next thing we will see of Black Americans will be on TV during Olympics. So the Black, during the Olympics, we'll watch Black athletes, African American athletes win everything. and we will admire them, right? And so we saw Black Americans from those two lenses, whether there are Black mayors, Black doctors, Black engineers, Black physicists, Black state reps, African American governors. We had no idea, let alone to talk about African American inventors. So to us, before we come to America, we have no clue the success and the triumph and the achievements, and of course the inventions of Black Americans. We have no clue, no idea. Only for us to come here and to start learning that, oh, there was a Black mayor, right? And so the intellectuality of the African American is not necessarily known to the to Africans prior to our coming here. So now we are here, and in our mind, we are in a foreign nation. We are in a white man's country to make money, because that's the sole reason why we come. And so we are only focused on making money. We are only focused on making our daily bread, and we don't have time to play, because the poverty in Africa compared to here is nothing. We're dealing with extreme poverty. Yes, Africa is on the rise. There are great things. You've seen it. We have skyscrapers. We have developed communities and all of that. There's civilization. There is democracy. We don't sleep. We don't sleep on trees. We are not chasing animals. Yes, that all that good stuff is in Africa. And when I say Africa, please pardon me. I'm referring for the purposes of the conversation, I'm going to be using Africa as a placeholder, but I'm literally talking about West Africa because I'm from there, so I'm familiar with that culture and that part of the region. So we don't know, we are not connected intellectually with Black Americans. Socially, we are. Even politically, we're not. Because again, we grew up knowing hearing the name of Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King, but we didn't know who they were and the achievement and what they had done. We had no clue, right? I wore my Malcolm X T-shirt, and I thought he was a cool guy. I just thought it was a cool T-shirt. The letter X on your shirt alone is a swag. Malcolm X. He had this cool glasses on. A lot of people would wear his glasses just to mimic Malcolm X. We were just cool to wear his T-shirt. He had no idea who he was, what he did, what he stood for, what he was standing for, what he was fighting for. No clue. We probably thought he was like a fashion guy or something, but we just wore his T-shirt and we're cool with it. Again, to tell you the gross disconnect of the intellectual understanding or connection of Africans on the continent and Black Americans. There is that huge disconnect. And so a lot of times when we Africans come here, because of the poverty that we are running from, right? And I said this, we have a lot of great things in Africa, but the extent to which we indulge in poverty is unexplainable. The level of poverty on the continent is gross, and again, that's another conversation to be had. But it's nothing compared to what Americans go through in Europe, right? We know there's poverty in America, in Europe, and elsewhere, but nothing compared to what Africans are going through. So when we are coming here, there is this laser focus mindset. All we are looking for is the economic opportunity. We want to make money. We want to work. We want to go to school so we can take care of ourselves, pay some bills back home, and take care of our people. Because remember, we are very community-oriented folks. And so while we are here and we're looking at some Black Americans in some bad neighborhoods who are not living to the standard or to the expectation of the African, because our expectation of America is very high. This is a very successful country. Everybody's living good because the movies we see are good, right? What we see of America is superb, fantastic. We don't see poverty. We only see beautiful homes, beautiful houses. So we know that here it's like mini heaven. And so when we come, our expectations are very high. Everybody should be doing well. That is the standard in our head. So when we in America, we're not looking for anything less than that. And so we're not. So when we see our fellow Blacks, when we see Blacks, in some neighborhoods not doing well, we don't want to have anything to do with it. And so pardoning the African for these type of attitudes, it's not intentional. It's just how It's just the circumstances in which we got here. And also know that we have no condition, we have no idea what your ancestors went through, our ancestors and your ancestors went through. We don't even know a lot about our own history. And so so we're not connected emotionally and spiritually like that. We are cousins who have been separated. We are cousins who have been thrown apart, and we've been sold lies to, right? This cousin has been told, oh, that cousin is bad. He is no good. That cousin has been, told, hey, the cousin here, your brother here, don't even worry about them. They ain't got nothing. So you don't have a good image of your cousin here, and this cousin doesn't have a good image of this cousin here. Your expectation is very low, but you don't even know each other, let alone to have any expectations. The only person you see are Europeans, white people, greatness, goodness. And so when you come to America, oh, that's all you expected. Right. And so when you encounter black people, when Africans encounter black people, there is that oblivion of the self connectivity, the self identity, the cultural connection, the historical connection, right? There is that oblivion. And so we can't see you as us. We think we're different and you are different because culturally you talk differently. You are American. You're black, but you are different black. And if you are hanging around the corner or if you're not doing so well, in our head, we're wondering, how are you feeling in America? Because America is great. Everything is great, right? You should be doing well in America, in from our perspective. So how are you now succeeding? Because I got here and I'm able to go to school. I'm able to find a job. I'm able to, and I wasn't even born here. I just got here last week and I can find a job already. So why do you not have a job? Not knowing your story, not knowing your struggle 400 years ago, 200 years ago, 50 years ago, and even today. We don't know about institutional racism. We don't know about redlining. We don't know about the effects of wealth, the welfare system. We have no idea that Black America has to fight, and they have been fighting and fighting and still fighting different types of struggle, which are embedded in the institutions. We don't know as Africans and perhaps Caribbeans. All we know is that we're trying to find some job, and we don't want to associate with anybody who's not trying to be serious with their lives. And again, it's nothing personal. Based off these factors, unintentionally, we tend to like, oh, you are not doing well, you're not behaving properly, you are not acting like you're supposed to. And so I don't want to associate myself with you. I want to do well. So I want to link up with somebody who's also doing well so I can progress. So we have a different attitude. It has nothing to do with hate. We have not been trained to hate you, even though there are propagandas. There are what we see on TV, right? We see a lot of negativity on TV about both sides. And so yes, somehow we've been indoctrinated, trained to see each other in a negative light, right? At least our communities and our societies in a negative light. In addition to some of these for the lack of better word, misinformation that we've had all these years about each other. And so we don't know how to act when we meet, when we encounter each other. So all I'm saying is that we're not enemies, and Africans are not intentionally trying to hate Black Americans. It is because of lack of information, because of lack of understanding, and that has to do with what the colonizers and enslavers did, right? And so in this day, we need to start talking to each other. We have to be intentional about talking to each other, creating spaces where we can converse, debates, conversate on what happened to us. Why is your community doing this? Why are some people in your community, African Americans, why do they behave this way? Why do you struggle with this? And Africans, why do you have this negative connotation about your continent? Why do we always see babies with flies or this negative images about Africa? And why do you come here, and how are you able to work so hard? how are you able to have this motivation, and how do you work? I mean, how do you some of the traditions that you maintain in your culture, your festivals, the way you are, and like, how do you do these things, right? How are you able to do? We got to be able to talk to each other, because again, we are cousins, brothers and sisters who have been separated, who have been kept from talking to each other, and so we don't know about who we are collectively and the power thereof. And so we have to be intentional about getting to know each other, because as Black people, whether you are on the continent of Africa or in North America, every other race benefits off of us. On the continent of Africa, there is no supernation that's not getting their resources and getting their money from Africa. They come to Africa all the time. They are there making money, while they tell you Black Americans, or they tell North American Blacks, Africa is of no use. See, they played us. And so you see African American, you see Africa, it's too far. I don't even know if they eat well. I don't even know if they have roads. What? They have houses? Because of the images that has been shown you, right? And you don't know too. So you don't think of going. Meanwhile, your ancestors, you have a heritage of gold, diamond, bauxite, every other mineral on this earth is there. Great people, intellectual, smart people back home, all the natural resources. And this is your heritage, Black America. This is your heritage, Caribbean. This is your heritage, South American Black and Afro Latino. You will share a heritage of kings and queens and natural resources. The biggest continent on the planet, the richest and the biggest. A continent full of so much wealth, a continent of royalty. We had monarchy before any other race, right? So royalty runs through our blood, whether you are Black on the continent of Africa or a Black American, because we come from royalty. So it runs through us. And that is why we do magic. And that is why Black Americans have invented and changed this world in spite of the challenges they've been through, because the royal blood runs through them. And we Africans also know that. And so how different are we? The only problem we have now is because we are not talking collectively to each other enough. If everybody is benefiting off of us, right? If you're in Chicago, if you live in America and you go to any Black community, there are all kinds of businesses there. There are liquor stores, coffee shops, gas stations, and hair braiding. No, hair braiding is the Africans, but beauty shops, and these are all owned by Asians, Arabs, mostly Asians and Arabs, and sometimes East Europeans. They're the ones that they make money off of us. We don't, and it's not the fault of Black Americans, because Black Americans have built cities and neighborhoods and thriving businesses that have been burned down as we know it. Historically, the Black Americans they built the first Wall Street. They've built a lot of thriving communities that had been burned down. You can just Google this. So it's not for the want of trying. Black Americans have done their best. They've invented the cell phone. They've invented the pacemaker, the helicopter. They've invented a whole bunch of inventions. I have a list, about 200 of them. Another time we'll do just that, inventions of Black Americans. Right, a lot of the things we use today were invented by Black Americans. I was just reading about the laundry machine, and the locomotive train, the engine, right? Even what you call it, Cadillac, the company Cadillac was saved by Black Americans. The history is enormous. The achievement of Black Americans, in spite of what they had to go through, they are unimaginable, and how their work have influenced and changed the course of our very existence as the human race. But until we start being intentional, until we start talking and doing these things, we're not going to know about how powerful we are, right, collectively. and how we can benefit of each other, how we can do business right with each other. Because if Africans are not doing business with Black American other entrepreneurs, technocrats, intellectuals, Black American inventors, right? If Africa, which is has always been on the rise, even more so now, right? Russia is partnering with African nations. What China is partnering with African nations. Japan is, Singapore, all these great nations. Europe, they've always been in Africa. Europe survives off of Africa, especially France. And so, if they're making money and partnering with doing bilateral trades and doing all those things to benefit them as Europeans, why not Black? If Black America were a nation, they say that they would have been the eighth wealthiest nation on earth. The economy of the Black community in America alone is huge, about 40 million plus people. Extreme wealth in the Black American nation. Again, a Black American community. Again, if they were a nation on their own, and if they were allowed to build a nation on their own, they would have been the eighth. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the eighth wealthiest nation on earth. So they have the capacity. They have the capacity, the capability, the intellectual ability to be able to partner with Africa and do business. But we're not doing that. And so we're not benefiting off of each other. We're not taking advantages of the resources that are among different Blacks. Rather, we're looking at each other from a lens of animosity or negativity. Right? I don't know you. You don't have a culture. But yet, and that goes to a video that I've seen, on the video that I talked about, that's on social media. My brother called Zanu talked about, he had an interview, and I want you to listen to the interview, and I'm going to comment on it, right? Because this is outrageous. Okay, so in the video you heard a lot. You see, first of all, is the tone, and you see he is expressing a lot of the sentiment. He's expressing the sentiment of a lot of Africans, especially here, especially Africans in North America, because the African on the continent is their attitude towards Blacks. Their attitude is very different from the Africans that are here. Because once we get here, once we're here, we start looking at Black Americans differently, because we're like, oh, you have all of this and you are not doing well. Some of you, right? Because we're now exposed a lot of times to a lot of successful Blacks. Because mostly the areas, the communities that we live in, and so we live in, maybe sometimes when we start off, a lot of time we start off in, poor or average communities, average looking communities, middle class communities. And yes, there's a struggle within the Black American community when it comes to their youth and people not taking advantage of the education and all of that. But if you understand that, again, these are people who have come from a culture or a system that wouldn't allow them to study. They were killed for reading a book. Okay, back in the day, you'll be killed for trying to read a book. These are people that have come from that culture. So if you see remnants of that, you can't attribute it. You can't say as a result of they trying to be intentionally, they just wanted to be lazy. No, people don't want to be lazy, but trauma is passed on, right? When people go through trauma, they pass it on. When people have gone through a certain type of treatment, remember, after slavery, how many Blacks nationally, they have not been given the opportunity. They have not been taken through therapy, right? There has not been a national call for Black Americans to go through therapy. There has not been reparations. They just left. They just said, okay, you were free. And even so, they had to go through Jim Crow. And after Jim Crow, you still see, when you come here, what Black people go through. If you are informed of the community enough, and if you're not, I encourage you to start reading more and learning more about the South. Go to the South, check out some of the plantations, slave plantations, and learn more about Black history to understand what they have had to go through. I'm not making excuses for mediocrity. I just feel like we have to understand, once we understand the trauma and the struggle of our people on both sides, we can begin to approach each other with more love and compassion. How do we have so much hospital compassion, love, and but we're not showing it to each other. We show compassion to everybody else, including people who enslaved us and colonized us, but we have short temperament for people who look like us. We can't stand our own. We can't stand each other. But we have all the tolerance and all the forgiveness for every other race who have wronged us and who still wrong us. The Chinese come to black communities, they disrespect us, but we go every day and we buy from them. But then we can show that much love. We can continuously be what do you call it, sympathetic, and show empathy to our struggles and say, look, let's deal with each other with love. Even though we may have our misunderstandings, skepticism, let's have a roundtable conversation. Let's keep encouraging roundtable conversations, and that's how we're going to heal. And so let me respond to Zanu. The brother was saying that African Americans don't have a culture. First of all, let's look at culture. Okay, let's look. He says they don't have a culture. Freedom was given to them. Well, in Africa, the African countries that were colonized, Kwame Nkrumah got freedom for us, but they gave it to us. We didn't force them. They gave us freedom. So if you say Black Americans, oh, they were giving freedom. Yeah, they were giving freedom, just like we were giving freedom too. But remember, Black Americans, the kind of fight and resistance they put up to get their independence, they get their freedom, no African country did that. Because we know how Dr. Kwame Nkrumah came to Ghana and negotiated freedom from the British. The British were somehow they didn't us, they didn't kill us, mass shooting, sending dogs to chase us down, and they were not lynching us in Africa for wanting to have our freedom. No. When Kwame Nkrumah came to the United States, Lincoln University, remember now, and a lot of Africans don't know this. This is what is very, very important. And Zanu said, "Oh yeah, African Americans were given their freedom," as though you were just some excuse my word, you just didn't have any option, or you had no power, or you were just sitting lazy around, and then the white man decided, oh, let's just give them some freedom. No, that's not how it happened. But again, but in the same context, we were also given freedom. But this is how it happened. This is how we got our freedom. And this is how we have to appreciate the work of African Americans. Because prior to Kwame Nkrumah coming to Ghana to negotiate our freedom from the British, Sub-Saharan Africa were under European colony. We were being ruled by the British. We were being taught how to eat, how to dress, how to worship, how to govern by the British and Europeans the way they want us to. Even how we ate, right? They said you should drink tea a certain kind of way. You should drink tea in the morning with bread and butter, and then you should eat lunch, and then at 12 noon, and then 6 p.m. We were literally lined up, and marched and ruled. They were ruling us with their culture. And we didn't, thankfully, we had some of the culture, our culture preserved, but we actually, and that's why today in Ghana, some schools in Ghana will literally penalize little kids for speaking their own language. They want you to speak English. In Africa, the better English or French you speak, the more you are considered an intellectual. We equate your eloquence in the Queen's language or in French or Portuguese to intelligence. Oh, he speaks good English, he must be intelligent. That's how much we revere our colonizers' language and their culture. And that goes to the extent to which we were under we were under rules. We were being oppressed. We didn't have our freedom. So Kwame Nkrumah, whilst he was in the United States studying, he met Dr. Martin Luther King. And this is what changed the history of Africa. And if we don't know this, Kwame Nkrumah met Dr. Martin Luther King, and he studied and watched and learned how Dr. Martin Luther King was fighting and going about the civil rights movement in America. Kwame Nkrumah was heavily influenced and inspired by the civil rights movement led by Dr. Martin Luther King. And through that friendship and tutelage and inspiration, Kwame Nkrumah went to Ghana. When Kwame Nkrumah went to Ghana, he had learned how the is it the global the Renaissance of the Harlem Renaissance, right? Correct me, I stand to be corrected. He learned from the civil rights movement, particularly his friendship with Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Dr. Martin Luther King, gave him so much knowledge. And that's why Kwame Nkrumah was so far ahead of all of us when he came to the continent of Africa, when he came back. His vision, his way of doing things, his leadership style was so much ahead of us. And we always wondered why. As Ghanaians, we always wondered why. A lot of the civil rights leaders that rose up from the continents, including Patrice Lumumba, Nyerere, right, and Azikiwe of Nigeria, were all students of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Because when he came back, he had gotten this advanced knowledge and skill set of how you organize and fight oppressors. And so due to that inspiration and tutelage and partnership, friendship with Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, when Nkrumah came with Dr. King, when Nkrumah came to Ghana, he didn't take up arms. He negotiated our freedom from the British, and he had a skill set to do it. He had the knowledge to do it. Why? Because he had gotten advanced knowledge. He had seen how it's done in America. Who knows? Dr. Martin Luther King may have even given him the blueprint. But this is the story. This is the historical connection between Ghana and Black America, or Ghana and the diaspora, West Africa and the diaspora. A foundation was laid down by our ancestors. These two gentlemen had a vision, of course, inspired by the great himself, Marcus Garvey. And so when Kwame Nkrumah did what he did in Ghana, gain our independence for us, it had a ripple effect on the West, on the sub-region. And everybody decided to get their independence. Kwame Nkrumah started OAU, Organization of African Unity. He wanted to unite the entire continent, which is why we have AU now. Organization of African Unity has morphed to become AU, African Union. This is Kwame Nkrumah's vision. This is a man who had direct relationship with a Black American civil rights leader. A Black American civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King. When finally Ghana had their independence, and Kwame Nkrumah invited all these Black American leaders, including Dr. Martin Luther King himself. When Dr. Martin Luther King left Ghana after the independence inauguration of Ghana, when Dr. Martin Luther King came back to America, he gave the speech, The Birth of a New Nation. Listen to that speech. He mentioned the independence of Ghana. He mentioned Dr. Kwame Nkrumah in that speech, The Birth of a New Nation, one of his famous speeches. And so we must understand, when my brother says that, in his submission or his argument, that Black Americans do have a culture, he said, what do you have? Oh, civil rights, like as though that meant nothing. He said you have civil rights, but you lost it. No, without civil rights, I think Zanu, I think the brother talking is in Chicago or in America, right? And he's probably a citizen. Had it not been for civil rights, we couldn't even be here as Africans or Caribbeans. We probably wouldn't be here, becoming citizens, owning businesses, living freely and happily in this country. We have been successful. We have been so successful in this country. And a lot of times, African Americans have helped us in so many ways. And as Africans, we must stop acting as though we are not being grateful. If you look at all our stores, right, the small businesses, from the hair braiding, the restaurants, even our festivals, without the support of African Americans, do you think that, I mean, let's look at it closely. Most of these businesses, the majority of the clients are Black Americans, right? And so they support us, right? And you can't just the tone from which he was addressing the issue, that you don't have a culture. And again, I was going to give a definition to culture. So let's look at culture. Let's look at what culture actually means. Okay. It says the best definition of culture is the collective shared beliefs, customs, arts, values, values of life of a particular people or society, which are learned or passed down through generations. This include tangible aspects like language, morals, customs, as well as material traits like food, music, institutions, forming the unique personality of a social group. Unique personality of a social group. So when African Americans have a unique personality, it is their culture. They had to create it out of something, right? And culture is just the way of life of a group of people, right? So excuse me, we say value system. Yes, they do have value systems. Do you know about the family reunion of Black Americans? Every so often, every other Sunday or every so often, Black Americans will meet and have family reunions, placing value in the importance of family, in spite of coming through a history of their families being splitted apart and sold and torn and lynched. They still try as much as they can, based off passed on stories by their their ancestors. They still jump the brooms like we do in West Africa, right? So you can't say that these people don't have a culture. What is your culture? Was it? Yes, they have a family value system. One of their value system is family, right? Again, remember, a culture is just a unique. Let me go back. Let me go back to the definition. It says forming the unique personality of a social group. It's what you make it. Because remember, what we call culture, let's say for instance, as an Ewe person in Ghana, has evolved. We probably don't cook banku and akplan the way we do it just because that's how ancestors did it 100 years ago. They probably did it differently, but we changed. We may have added a thing or two, or one or two twists to it, right? And so even with us as Africans who are on the continent, right, with all the pride, and even when we come here and we thinking, oh, we still have our culture and all of that. Yes, even the ones we have has been filtered a little bit, because the hardcore culture, we don't practice those anymore. For example, back in the day when kings died, they used to literally bury these kings, right, with human beings. These are some of our practices. Are these the values that we want to be proud of? Right? There is what we call female circumcision. As Africans, we used to practice this. When I was growing up, they were practice. I don't know if they stopped it now, but a lot of people have stopped doing that. The government of Ghana, I know, have clamped on it. Other international organizations have, kind of campaigned against that. But female circumcision was a prime thing, was a continuous culture that was being practiced, even as late as the 80s, 90s, and probably early 2000s. And these are part of our values and our culture. Is that what we want to be proud of? But what I'm saying is that cultures have evolved. So even us, our culture has evolved as Africans. Yes, we have some core of it. So my point is, African Americans, they brought, even though their culture, the ones they brought here, the ones our ancestors brought here, was stripped of them, they remembered some. and try to keep some of them. But you know what? They live in a white country. They live in a European country. One, you are not allowed to practice your own culture. Two, you're not allowed to use your own name. You're not allowed to eat your own food the way you want it, marry the way you want it, all of that. And so, you have become a race of different people. And so, guess what? You become what that culture is. You become what that society is. But even in spite of all of that, they have formed their own dance. African Americans don't dance like Europeans. They have steps that look like African steps. They have their own dance. They have their own food, which is the value system, soul food. Soul food. There's a particular way they make it. That is part of culture. If you look at the definition of culture, it's part of it. The way they dress, their art has influenced the entire world. The biggest entertainers of the world, music and movie industry, they all belong in the African American community. And their style and way of doing things has changed the world. Everybody mimics them. Go to Asia, go to in the Indian, go to India, right? East India or Asia or Europe, North America itself is where it's coming from. Africa, everywhere around the world, a people's culture is what others mimic when it comes to art, when it comes to entertainment, when it comes to art and entertainment. Black Americans created this. If you read about the story of FUBU, right, and all these guys, how they came about, they created this. It wasn't given to them. Cross colors, all this swag that we copy back in Africa, African Americans created it. This is part of their culture. This is how they dress. Just like how we dress a certain kind of way, we wear certain kind of materials and clothing. They created this, African Americans, and everybody else is using it. If it's not that good, why would anybody want to use it? It's good. It's beautiful. It's dope. It's cool. It's valuable. Come on now. Look, check this out. There are so many ethnic groups or races in America. America is the biggest economy, greatest nation on earth. The biggest group, America has the most diverse nations, period. And different cultures influence this country, right? The Asian culture, the Japanese culture. If you look at all these other cultures that are in America, the most influential of all the cultures is Black American culture, pop culture. There's no way you can say that they don't have a culture. You know, he cited, oh, if someone talks to you, somebody say, where you from? You say Haitian American. Okay. And then he said, okay, Haitian American, right? What? Okay. Without the person knowing that you're from Haiti, well, the person can identify your culture and validate that perhaps if they visited Haiti and tasted, and you give an example of the food. So you agree that food is part of people's culture. Yeah, African Americans have their food. They have their dance. They have their beautiful dances. They have the beautiful arts, clothing line, swag, which we mimic a lot as Africans on the continent and here. Come on, and it's fine. They can mimic us. They like African Americans like our dashikis and African wear. That's how it should be. But we can't discredit. We can't overlook. We can't sound like you don't have a culture. What do you mean? And see, the way it was presented, it was as though you don't matter because you don't have a culture. Our cultures don't value us any, make us more valuable, value us any than other races. Africans have culture, but we also have crazy behaviors back home. And our culture can also do crazy things to us. Our culture is not always giving us the best outputs. So we must have the balance. We must understand that, yes, we have a culture. We should be proud of our culture as Africans. Caribbeans have theirs. African Americans have theirs. Hey, Caribbeans, a lot of Caribbeans were West Africans that were taken to the Caribbeans and the Brazil, but they've kept it. They've also evolved, right? Patois has a lot of Ghanaian languages in there. Should you say, oh, they created Patois, just like Ibanez was created, right? Ibanez is an African American language. Heck, go to the South. If you want to learn more in the depth of African American culture, go to the Gullah Geechee community. Go to the Gullah Geechee community in the South and watch their life. Listen to their language. It has, trinklets of African language mixed with English. People have moved and formed cultures based off what they had. They mix it up. It's beautiful diversity. You can discount other people's culture. You can't say that African Americans don't have a culture. They do have a culture, valuable cultures. Yes, there are challenges, just as we have gross challenges within our culture, in our traditions back home. As I've mentioned, just one, female circumcision, and I've also mentioned when we used to bury kings with human beings. Gross elements of our traditions and cultures that we needed to do away with. And so we have to be careful how we address people that look like us, our own people. We can't discount and discredit their hard work, their achievement in spite of struggles. We have struggled as Africans. We have done great things. We are surviving. We are coming up. We're doing what we can. African Americans have been under extreme oppression. We don't have white people in Africa ruling us, right? Europeans are not in Africa physically. These are African Americans have to deal with Europeans physically here. In all ways, politically, economically, religiously, they didn't have a chance. Numbers, they didn't have a chance. But as a people, they have risen up and they've done very well, extremely well, extremely well. And we have to, the least we can do is to say we respect that, show that in our attitude. Mentally, we have to be able to appreciate each other, right? And so I disagree with him, my brother, saying that African Americans don't have a culture. They do have a culture. And I think that this sentiment with a lot of Africans needs to be checked. We have to look at it again and begin to consider how we view each other. Because at the end of the day, we are only a reflection of ourselves, all of us. And the extent to which we can respect the other depends on how much we love and respect ourselves. And if we do honor ourselves, when we see fellow blacks, fellow black and brown anywhere, they should reflect the king and queen in us, and hence show and exhibit that kind of respect, right? And so I want to end here, but this gives us room for us to engage more on bridging the gap. It's the most important thing for Black people globally. We must seek the betterment of fellow Blacks around the world, because we have been done a great disservice. We are still under attack in any way, in any form, everywhere. We have to stick together. This act of division is not going to help us. This state in which we are is not going to help us. So collectively, we all have to endeavor to work collectively towards our healing and unity. This is Alinko. This is the Progressive Mind Show. Stay tuned. There's more to come. And to whom much is given, much is required. We shall be back.